If custom coaters bring a level of customness to powder coating, test panels can add a level of science and accountability. Whether it's visual, durability, or fade resistance, panels give confidence and real-world control to produce the ideal. The thing is, metal matters when control is out of your hands either before it gets to or after it leaves your job shop. But there are many other great reasons to utilize test panels. There are so many variables or cogs to getting to the finish line to a beautiful completed project and a happy customer. Our guest, Scott Crossley from ACT Test Panels, runs the gambit with me in a never-covered subject on the show. Get ready to level up your powder coater game. Welcome to the Powder Coater Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Scott, if you didn't know that. And today I would like to introduce Scott Crossley from ACT Test Panels. Today we're going to talk about something we've never talked about before, which is test panels. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, I'm going to get, I'm just going to kind of give everybody an overview of what we are talking about today. So today we're going to delve into a crucial aspect of powder coating that we hardly ever talk about, but it actually is used every day and could be used every day in your shop if you needed it to. We're going to explore why introducing test panels into your workflow can be a game changer for troubleshooting problems, maybe testing out a new powder you've never tried before, or maybe making samples for your customers. There's lots of reasons to use test panels, and we're going to dive into that, all kinds of things about test panels today. So with that, let's get going on the show. Scott, I met you, and I guess it was just so refreshing to meet you. Because I can't recall if there was, well, first of all, you presented at the Custom Coater Forum,
right?
Not the technical did you do a technical conference presentation or just the Custom Coater?
Just the Custom Coater Forum. And then I had a booth.
Yeah, so you had a booth. And I just don't recall if anybody had been there with test panels. It was the first time I met you is what I'm getting at. And I found your presentation refreshing and interesting. And so that's why I wanted to kind of bring you on the show today. In fact, before we get going any further, let me bring up your website here that we can kind of go through. You actually have a really nice website. And I have to say this because I have gone to other test panel sites and it's very hard to navigate. They're kind of old school, I guess. And I just found yours so refreshing. It says it's acttestpanels.com, and you can actually order panels and everything you need. In fact, let's go over to the, let's go over to the testing supplies, I think is what it is.
No, it'd be test panels for there. So testing supplies would be more for people running labs.
Oh, okay.
Test panels, yeah.
So go back to test panels, and then you click on what? Test grades.
So we have two different types of panels there that you're showing. So the ones that with the ACT box are kind of our what we call pedigreed panels. So those are great for the higher end quality control. When you're trying to eliminate the noise of metal, or you're trying to get something with, let's say, comparable iron phosphate, something like that.
Yeah.
That's what the ACT family is for. And then the other side of panels is the true panel. Right. And those are great for visuals or quick setups. these are the types of panels that the powder suppliers use when they send you the color chips and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Those are typically true panels, not something that you'd want to do like all your quality testing, not all your quality testing on, but great for color, great for setups.
And can I click on this box?
Yeah.
Okay. I can click on it. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, here we go. All right. Let's go. We can get all this good stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have,
wow.
a plethora of different things, depending on if you like to work with steel or aluminum. And then we have some of them that are already primed. Typically, that's used more on the liquid side. So people just want something where they don't have the same holdout. So they're looking for a prime panel. But an aluminum panel like that, in a 2.5 by 3, 3 by 5, very typical for color display in particular. So if you're getting in new powders and people aren't supplying you a chipboard or something like that, this is a great one that you could shoot with the job so you have a record of it.
Yeah, and you can choose by thickness and substrate as size, everything. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I just like it when, you can order something. It's so hard to, again, with the industry versus the smaller custom coder shops, guys like that are so super busy. They don't have time to, sort through, and they just want to click and ship kind of thing. So I like the fact that you have a really modern, sophisticated site. So I head on over to ACT Test Panels. And I'm going to just stop sharing for a moment, but I know we're going to be talking about lots of different things about test panels. So we may refer back to this website too, if you need to share something with us.
Yeah, it's a great visual for it.
When you and I were emailing to set this episode up, one of the things that struck me about what you said about your background was that you have serviced custom coders all over the world. So that intrigued me. I'm going to let you roll with it. You've been in this business for about 25 years, right? So tell me more.
So I started in pre-treatment, so late 90s. And then that got me into a lot of different custom coders. Most of my customers there were smaller customers with spray wands, 3-stage systems, that type of stuff. That was where I started. I worked for Sherwin-Williams for over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I was working more with custom coders all over the world. So through a lot of different experience. So a lot in the U.S., I was in kind of the sales realm for those guys. So had them as customers. Then as a sales manager, I had them as customers. But going around the world, I was working with a lot of larger agricultural construction OEMs, and they're always looking to do the same thing uniformly all over the world. So I was involved in helping transfer a lot of products into different regions, China, South America, Europe, and then following that, making sure that the initial runs and that kind of stuff were going well, and did that for agriculture as well as communication and computer equipment, all those types of things. So a lot of people that use source tiering led me into a lot of different shops in a lot of different places.
And did you do both powder and paint, or just strictly powder?
Yeah, I've done powder, liquids, plastics, wood coatings. I've covered the gambit on a lot of those different things. I was never just specialized in powder. It was one of the technologies that was used in really what I call coatings or the finishing markets. Yeah.
And how did you learn about ACT, or how did you get involved with them initially?
So, for a long time, I was a customer or a user. So at Sherwin, ACT has some panels that are either specified into some specs or just used as a standard for quality control as well as product development, which is really what we've been known for, what the business here was built on. I happened to be at a point with Sherwin-Williams where I was doing some different things, and I was actually recruited. They contacted me, and I'd been a customer. And I came from small business originally. I came from a family that ran small businesses, so it was neat to go. Never thought I would do 20 some odd years in corporate America.
You don't sound like that kind of person either.
Okay. Well, I enjoyed that time, but getting back
Yeah.
into a small space. So we have 50 some odd employees. It's nice to know, unless they started in the last week or so, everybody's name
Right.
that's here and on the floor, and be able to work in both sales, marketing, sometimes in production, problem solving. It's just it's a neat encompassing for me to use all the different skills I've learned over time.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's sometimes the beauty of powder coating, because it is a smaller network of people sometimes, and starting new adventures in powder coating is always exciting, right?
Yes.
And I love it when companies like ACT kind of test the boundaries of that. And they are doing that now because you kind of are a unique product manufacturer, because you are straddling both sides. So some of the other things that you guys do besides selling test panels is you and helping coders with their processes and stuff, is you actually make samples for other companies. Is that right?
Yes. So realistically, we are a custom coder in ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the panels and processes that we make are really custom coding. So every day we're running 3 pre-treat systems, both immersion as well as inline spray. We're running e-coat processes, and we're running both liquid and powder coat sprays. So we're doing where somebody needs to test, let's say, tape on a full car system to get approved to be used at maybe like GM or Ford. We're actually making panels that somebody can then test the tape on a full automotive system. So we can do the whole build up of those. We'll do things where people need to get UL approved and they need to get their sticker done. So they need a powder coated panel to get a UL approval just on the sticker. We'll make those types of panels. So we're not really in a custom coder market. We don't go out and we're not looking to do hundreds of parts of different things, but we do some prototype things, or we'll do a lot of materials that's used in the approval process for other people. So it's difficult to find somebody that can build you, 4x12s of a car finish.
Right.
And we can do that. Or we're used by even some of the pre-treatment companies, and even some of the paint companies, to be able to do both pre-treatment and coating, whether it's liquid or powder, at the same time, so that they can get approvals. So it's never a lot on that side as a custom coder, but we have all that complexity and kind of job to job, batch to batch operation that you would find in the typical powder shop.
Yeah, that was my next question. Is it a line system or a batch system, or how do you do that?
So realistically, we're broken down into cells. So we have a conveyor line, but it's only for pretreatment. Those panels then come off and they're precisely handled, and then they're moved either to e-coat or into our paint department. So we're about 80,000 square feet under roof. But a panel, from the time it's stamped to, let's say, goes through a full finish, goes over a mile, but it never goes in a straight line. So it goes from one department to another, and back to another, and then back to another, and then over to shipping. So it moves around in a pattern. But we're really kind of more of a cell producer, or batch operation at any given time. And the neat part about that then is we can sell a panel or have products at any level. So if you just need a cut, we've got it. If you need it all the way through, one cell or all 3 cells, then we have that too.
From end to end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to a custom coder. They have a line system and a batch system yesterday out of California. And they had a line system that was extremely unique, where it took you from pre-treatment all the way down to the end to packaging. She was telling me that it was unique in many different other ways, but because I think it was infrared as well. But I didn't know that was even possible with a line system. I guess my exposure to it is extremely limited because we're batch coders mostly, but I have seen a line system now, and they are truly amazing looking and to watch, and see them move, and the guns, the robotic guns go everywhere. It's really exciting to watch.
I've worked with a lot of OEMs that do that and can do, basically the part comes in and the pack department is right after it.
Yeah. So let's talk about why incorporating test panels matter. And let's discuss some of the troubleshooting with those problems as well.
Sure. Well, I think the biggest thing to think about, and really the most important part for us, is that it's integrated for the right reason.
Yeah.
Sorry, just
Oh yeah, no, it happened. Hey, I got a sweaty husband back here. It's okay.
So that they're integrated for the right reason. I mean, the biggest thing that we want to be able to do is find the right panel for the right operation that helps anybody make more money. And that could be through quality control, which either helps you not spend more on rejects or allows you to get more business because you can really show that off. Or allows you to not have rework, sacrifice a panel instead of a part, because those are one things that a custom coder doesn't own. And we know how hard that is, because we do our own products, and every once in a while we're asked to do prototypes. Yeah. And that's when everybody gets scared. So what you guys are doing every day when you don't own the metal or the part is infinitely harder than when I have reams of metal and I can make mistakes. So that's where we want test panels to be part of, a good alternative to not doing expensive rework. If you're working on a new geometry or something that's larger, or just making sure that the color is right before somebody starts putting it on 100 different parts. Yeah. Those are the quality things that it's a good idea to do something.
It takes a lot of trust in your resources as a powder, buying from a powder supplier. Mm-hmm. And some are better than others. Sometimes you have to take a risk. And so I know, for instance, when you're working with candy colors or two-layer effects and stuff like that, or Dormans or something, you never quite know what you could be getting, at the end, right? And the additional thing to that is it's the type of part it is. So if it's got lots of curves and Faradays and stuff like that too, it could present a problem, and perhaps, you could avoid quite a bit with using test panels to begin with, right?
You could, and something that's not heavy gauge or light aluminum, that kind of stuff, can easily be bent or put into different configurations. Yeah. And we do things all the way up to about an 18 by 24 footprint, so you could really get even a bigger
big panels
effect if you needed to.
Right. Yeah.
So those are just things to think about. I mean, I know sometimes it's on the fly and I just got these in, and it's hard to think about those things. And there's a case sometimes where I can grab scrap, but there's other times where you're really looking at, particularly on the quality side, what is the quality of that metal, or what is the quality of the process that you come into? And I think that's another one I didn't mention. I mean, not all jobs go well, and sometimes questions are asked. But we can certainly tell you that metal matters. So just because it worked one time, if somebody sent you in with different metal, it doesn't mean that your process changed. It could be something on the input side that changed. And that's one of the big things that we do is we have a very consistent source, so you can actually go back and I did it on this and it worked both times. You sent me two different pieces of metal and it didn't work. I don't know. Oh my gosh,
I know. The welders sometimes, it's like their own world. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And they won't tell you because they're so hurried or they're so busy. Oh, by the way, unless you ask, they won't tell you. It's just their nature, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe it's just that they're so crazy busy, or they're just somebody else is dropping it off. And
well, metal's a lot of times metal to people is metal. And I've seen many finishing operations, even OEM operations, and this is where the custom coaters of the world really come into play, is that a lot of these, they're metal benders. They're engineers, they're metal benders, they're designers. And, as somebody who's sold paint into a lot of the industries, there's a lot of people in these places that's the last thing they want to worry about. And it's the last thing they want to do. They want to outsource it. And if they do insource it, the number of resources that go to it, because I just need it to be black. Well,
Right.
that can actually be very complex in that whole thing. Or they designed a great part. And I mean, I know you don't have a wash system, but people out there with wash systems will get parts that won't drain.
Yeah.
Right. And now they're vacuuming or blowing them out, and it's a mess everywhere. So, I mean, it's amazing the things that you can get into. And I certainly, I mean, again, as a custom coder and somebody that's been through those things, sympathize with those kinds of things. But those are things that could cause issues that maybe having something else that's a backup of, well, we shot it on something we know is good metal and use the same process. Here's a retain of why we know that that's what we did is good.
And I can definitely see like situations where there's like pinholing or something like that, where a test panel could really come in handy to test the powder or the system or the process or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That always seems to be the bane of everybody, right? Is pinholes and debris, unknown debris.
Unknown debris. I mean, it's gotten better and better with technology over time, but clumping of any metallics.
Oh gosh, I know. Yeah.
Is it in the box, or is the gun spitting? Like what's actually happening?
Yeah. And sometimes you're working with an old powder that may have expired. Now, custom coaters, if I've got something that's been on the shelf for a year, I'm not too concerned about it. Depends on who I bought it from. But like, we have shot test panels, specifically on and for metallics before we go to the final thing, because we've learned our lesson that the bonded metallics can expire.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why that is. Yes, I don't know enough about it. Maybe you do, or can comment on it.
I worked in the industry too before bonding was a big thing, and the industry for a long time had a lot of bonding capacity issues, but those were real nightmares when you didn't have bonding.
Yeah.
People do a nice job with that. There's a little bit of an alchemy and an art to bonding, and depending on how much sparkle is in there, really getting that bond. I mean, bonding is a neat process. It's like if making powder you kind of use as a blender, making a bond is like using a ninja.
Yes.
Right. It's a really high speed. It's basically beating it together. So truly getting a total homogeneous into that resin system is very, very batch dependent, and powder in general is very batch dependent. So it's while there's great consistency measures and there's great QC done by all the coating companies, it is a batch process. What they call bowl to bowl or line to line.
I mean, when you look at I went on a tour recently, so like they showed me the extruders, and then they took me to a separate room for the bonderizing machine, which didn't really look much different than an extruder. I thought it would be bigger, but it wasn't. Like it was just, and can you tell me, like, he didn't really talk too much about it because we had so much to see, but is it an additive that they put in to make it bond, or is it what? Can you explain that process just a little bit without
so it's mostly
getting too in the weeds?
it's mostly heat and pressure.
Okay.
So when you saw them make the powder originally, they had it in like a big bowl shaped thing, and it came down to the extruder.
Right.
Then they took those chips and they put it in another. It almost looked like the bowl that they put it in that flowed down to the top, right? Mm-hmm. So, like I said, that first bowl has a blade in it, and that kind of grinds the stuff together. In the second blade, like I said, it's now a high pressure, high speed. You're doing a lot more because you're literally taking that metallic flake and pushing it and bonding it. So it's a heat to pressure ratio that you're looking for, and you get too much heat and you kill the powder. Mm-hmm. And if you don't get enough heat, you won't get a good bond. So it's a time pressure dependency, and it's really a mix. So some of the custom ones are very, very difficult to make. And when you start to add more than one flake to get different looks, then those flakes are different sizes, so they cut in at different sizes. So I don't know, that might be too much in the weeds, but it's a heat to pressure thing that they do in there, and it's in a special room.
Yeah,
because those metallic flakes are actually, when you get that going, are explosive.
Okay.
So you're adding heat to a powder that's explosive. All metallics like that metal piece are explosive in themselves. So they're stored separately. And then that process is almost like a little bomb. So those walls and stuff that they put it in and then step out of is
it was like an operating room.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, there it is in the middle of the room. Okay, keep moving.
So you want that to be clean, obviously, too, but it's also, if you have a problem in there, that it doesn't then affect the rest of the, it's a firewall, really.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Because, again, I was on this tour and it was so much to see. And I'm just like a kid in the candy store. I'm just like, my mouth is open the whole time, right? While these chemists are working around and stuff. And so, he didn't spend, I was just gobsmacked, I guess, and couldn't ask a relative question. I was just like, So
it's another process, right? Okay, it has to go to another process, which explains why it's more expensive, because they got to do another process to it, and it's got more raw material in it. I mean, that is the basic in it, but it is true. It's great to go see it. I mean, anybody that gets that chance, I would definitely recommend anybody to let you in the building. Like you said, it's a neat experience.
It is.
It is good to learn and think about how that process is done.
I think I said this on one of my previous shows, is what I found was that the chemist was he was just as ecstatic about powders as custom coaters are, like passionate.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's exactly what you want in, somebody that's a chemist making these powders for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was nice to kind of see the enthusiasm and the excitement of being in a lab and having to be able to test different things for them. That excites them, right? Or try new things and stuff. So custom coaters are always testing the limits of powder anyways, whether it's a process or a look or whatever, right? So it's, kind of brings an art level to it. I don't know if you want to call it art, but like it's some kind of artistic level to it, right? So let's get on with more questions about, the types. So there's we've kind of talked and touched on some of the troubleshooting you can have, but let's talk about when you want to introduce test panels to, we did kind of talk about that just now, like what are some of the reasons why, but let's explore the ideal stages of production to introduce test panels.
The big thing is I want people to do what makes sense for them, right?
Right.
Every shop's different, and they shouldn't do something that doesn't make them money or make them better. So if you look at what people need to fit their needs, there are different types of panels to do all those things. And different shops will have different needs for different reasons. So the utility panels, we can talk about those. The controlled substrate panels, because I mentioned that metal matters a little bit earlier, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the next level, it would be comparisons. So am I as good as what the powder companies make things off of? Am I as good as another shop? So that's a comparable that can be used both for quality as well as marketing.
Yeah, I never thought about that before. Sure. That's a good point.
So the visual bare utility ones, we talked about this a little bit when we pulled up the website earlier in the show. This is great for visual checks. They're ready to go. You pull them out of the box and just shoot them. So they're really good for a quick color panel. You can do maybe a quick cure test on those. If you think something's going on with the oven or you're just starting up that day, those are great ones for that. But good, just quick retains general purpose. And this is one I was talking about too. They come in multiple sizes. So if you do larger format stuff and you're having problems, let's say coating the back of a big control box or something like that, you can get wider formats to see, am I got my gun set up right? I need to do some training. Those types of things can be done. And again, it's a bare utility. So it's a lower cost, ready to paint item.
Yeah. And panel work can be difficult. I think some guys do make it look easy, but it can be, if you've never shot a big, large panel piece before, it can be kind of difficult in terms of thickness or getting that even thickness across. So yeah, that would make sense why you'd want a larger panel. Right.
Most definitely. So the next one you would go to then is a controlled substrate. So this is getting something this is a more advanced quality control, as you say there. Typically these come where they need to be completely processed. So whatever you're doing to remove oil or grit or smut, you would want to do that as well as the painting process. So it's like we say right here on the slide, it's a real world control. So you're trying to get something that's either a great representation, i.e. cold rolled steel is typically the least expensive way to go do that. Or you can get into different metals to see how your system would work with those. So if you're getting a lot of galvanized, you're getting different aluminums, which was always something that people throw in. How do you treat this? How do I get things to stick to it? Does it have varnishing oils or those kinds of things on there? These would make great ways for you to compare how is your system capable versus what you could get in industry. What it takes out, though, is your customer sends you all those variables that we talked about, and they may not be the same every time. Here, you're getting very consistent metal, and have it a little bit later, but metal matters. And it's not just if it comes from the same supplier, i.e. the same person sending you the work, did they get that metal from the last person?
Yeah, and I think for us, it's always the crux for me is they want these galvanized. The architect has specified galvanized because they don't want it to corrode, but then the customer wants some beautiful architectural color, right? Or it has a bonded metallic in it and stuff, right. And it's a smooth, not a high hiding. So right. Then you got, you have to kind of just go from at that point, you're just kind of trying to mitigate or manage expectations, right? Because you don't know until you get it in your shop how good the Galvi was, right?
Oh, and we deal with a lot of different ones. I mean,
they're so
from
different.
Automotive to architectural, and the specifications on those are amazing. So I mean, we were working on an architectural project here recently, and G90 galvanized. The difference in the thickness. So the thickness on those are measured front and back. Mm-hmm. And it can be anywhere. So it's supposed to be up to 0.45. That's the 90 on each side. Mm-hmm. But it can be low in any place as much as 0.31. And that's across like a whole sheet or roll, right? So the noise just in that surface.
Oh my goodness.
And you're trying to measure it and get even films and that kind of stuff. So it is interesting that people don't think about that. Well, it's just galvanized, right? Well, yeah, it is. But where did you get it? What kind is it? How much spangle does it have? Because one mill will have a different spangle versus another spangle. 60 is the same as 90? No. Galvalume is the same? No. So it is interesting what people will throw at you without thinking, well, is that going to be a problem? Well, yeah, it might be.
It is. And even when we get like a bid in or a CAD drawing from a welder, it's like the first question I ask, is what is it?
Right. Yeah.
And for coaters too, we're batch coater, of course, but when you're dealing with like a really heavy staircase made out of stainless steel, that is far different. They're both going to be, far different from aluminum, right? They're both going to be heavy, but one's going to be way more harder to to hang in a
Yes.
rack than the other, right? So,
Right.
we charge differently for that, right? We charge more for a heavier substrate in our oven, or we'll have like a racking hanging charge
Sure.
for sure, because it is more effort,
Yes. Yeah, and you should, or even
and
just
there's
the
a lot
ramp
more
time.
time.
Even the ramp time on the oven is going to be completely different.
It's true. That's true.
So
awesome. Okay. Is there another slide here?
One more
pre-treatment. That's right.
Yeah. So the pre-treatment controls, and one of the things we're pretty proud about is our pre-treated panels are used quite a bit in industry as a control or yardstick. So if you look at a lot of technical data pages from many different companies, you'll see that they've been qualified, typically in powder on a Bondurite 1000 panel.
Okay.
Many of those come from us. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, we're one of the suppliers. I mean, our largest customers are the paint companies, and we send them a lot of things so that they can help build better products for you guys.
Right. So they'll use these to do salt testing, right?
Yes.
And they'll do, what other tests could you do with a pre-treated control panel?
So, I mean, the technical chemists are going to do all their work on that. So if they tell you the salt spray of it, if they tell you when they say how it cross hatches, so adhesion, when they run all of those top level controls, this is the type of panel that they're using as the baseline.
Okay.
And so that's where it's a great comparison to maybe what you're doing in your shop.
Right.
So, if you took a piece of metal and did your process, i.e. like one of those controls, and use this type of control, you can see how your quality stacks up to what the technical data page is that the powder company is kind of putting forward. So unless they're specifying zinc phosphates or other things on there, it's typically an iron phosphate panel. And you really get a good idea of where your quality matches up to a TDS from a paint supplier. And I know that's a question that you get sometimes, right? Like, well, what quality will it have? The paint says it'll do this. Will it do this? And be like, well, we don't do exactly what that is. We do X. So it would be, I think, for a lot of coders, a great piece of knowledge of maybe not every day, but once a year or something like that, taking a look at, we do this process a lot. How do we compare, whether it's a spray wand, a degreaser, a blast system, to what is the standard that the paint companies are using? And these are available to everybody the same as they are to the paint companies.
Yeah, I think that I can certainly say that we are starting to use these panels more as our customer base starts to grow, and certain architects are doing specified finishes. It's becoming more and more important for us to definitely do test sample. We're doing a lot more test samples for sure. And
those are different comparisons. I mean, you start talking about the architectural and the AMA world. I mean, there's very specific guidelines or prescriptions on, real qualifications for AMA work. It doesn't mean that other people can't meet them or match them up, but I mean, those are done on, chrome-coated aluminums, some other non-chromes, but chrome is still the standard on aluminum, particularly for that industry, as well as galvanized.
We didn't touch on this, but could you talk just briefly about thicknesses and why there are so many different kinds of thicknesses? Is there a reason, or is it just that it's specified to be tested that way?
Thicknesses of panels?
Yes.
A lot of it's done. I would say that our standard that we run, particularly in metals and stuff, is 032, and I would tell you that matches up more particularly with automotive gauge metals. That's our largest market. That's kind of where the company came from, was servicing the automotive coating industry. Other people will use different metals, and a lot of it's done for different bend factors. So it's both the durability and corrosion of the metal is why people would specify things, as well as then lighter gauges are typically done so that they have more of that bend factor. So it depends on with the panel what you're trying to do. If you need to do a test that involves bending or crimping, anything like that, you want to have a gauge of metal or a thickness of metal that matches more of what your end product would be.
And let's get into some of those tests too, because there is a bend test.
Sure.
And there is, I know, the hash mark test.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us what each one of those tests are, and or how they do them, and then what are they testing for?
Sure. So, I mean, a lot of different tests that are great, I think, for coaters. I mentioned a couple of them earlier, just on even simple panels, right? Doing a simple cure test. So MEK Rub has done a lot with that. Mm-hmm. The next simple one to work off of that would be a adhesion test. Typical, you'll find either the X-Cut can be typical for a lot of people.
Right.
There is an ASTM tape that's recommended for that. So if you're interested in that, but very simple, if you make a sharp X, you tape across that middle X part and you can pull back. And what you're looking for is that the sharp points don't pull back, that you don't see breaks at the sharp points. And that's showing
peeling,
you, or it's peeling. So that shows you adhesion. The crosshatch would then be the next one, right? And that becomes a little bit harder, but basically there, you're putting scribes down and across. And
like a tic-tac-toe.
It's like a really intricate tic-tac-toe, right? It's a crazy one. And then you're pulling with the tape. And what you're looking for there is that the squares stay intact. Mm-hmm. The difficulty with those is you definitely want to make sure the tools are sharp and that you get a good scribe, because if you undercut or nick something, you can actually fake doing that. But what you're really showing there is your ability to have adhesion to the substrate. And you'll see increases. If I don't have as good a cleaning, I could have lift in those areas to where I have good cleaning and good pre-treatment. I'll have better, tighter squares. Mm-hmm. And I always say the first thing to be is clean. I mean, they've done that a lot. If I can get the substrate clean, if I can get oils and stuff off there, your ability to start to get adhesion is great. And then if you can get some kind of pre-treatment and or surface, so a blast surface, a braided surface, any of those kinds of things start to move you up on those types of tests.
Okay.
The bend tests, in a lab, they'll use a machine that's called the conical mandrel bend. So it looks like almost like a cone of plenty, right, from our Thanksgivings. And so it's got a small end and a big end, and you put the panel down in that, and it's got a bar, and it pulls that over. And so you get this loop. And what you're looking for there is along that bent edge, do you see any cracking or breaking of that substrate? So powders will have so much elongation, they won't have infinite elongation, but that's what they're looking for. The architectural markets are a little bit more particular about that, but typically not on powder coating. So the extrusion side of that isn't as much. There are some liquid coatings that come out of coil lines that actually fold back on themselves. They call it a 0T. So there's nothing in there. You can fold the metal however thin it is right back on itself. And that's extreme.
Wow.
Powders tend to be a little bit too rigid for that.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily designed, both for the mill thicknesses that you use, because powder system is going to be 2 mils plus. Mm-hmm. Those systems are typically less than one mil thick.
And there's a pressure test too, right? Or it's like something that
you'll
drops.
Get a lot of people that call out, impact. Impact.
I can never remember. Yeah. And what is that machine called? Or that
it's an like impact tester.
Oh,
so
okay.
Don't make it
fancy name.
Exactly. And what it is it's actually just a tower, and the tower has a weight, and on that tower are grades. So you're dropping a known weight from a known height onto the powder, and so it doesn't impact. And that impact goes down and creates a dent, and that dent then also does the same thing once it's bending, right? It displaces the metal, and so you're seeing, can the powder hold up with the displacement of the metal? The real tough ones, though, is when they'll ask you to do reverse. So paint one side and then actually hit the back side of it.
Oh, wow.
Tends to be a much harder test for almost all powder coatings and that kind of stuff. It has an easier time staying on with the surface as it's staying with it. When it goes in reverse, it just becomes a whole different ball game. So it's measured by the foot-pounds. So how many feet do I go up and how many pounds do I drop is the impact testing that's typical done. And yeah, I've definitely seen that called out by some. What kind of salt spray are we going to get? What kind of adhesion? What kind of impact testing are pretty common that I've seen definitely coming to coaters.
Yeah, and the salt testing is it can be, there's an accelerated salt test.
Well, they call it an accelerated salt test, but it's really accelerating, let's say, real life.
Real life.
So when you say, okay, I'm going to do an accelerated 500 hours, it's still 500 hours. And there's an argument within the industry, what does 500 hours mean? I don't know. Is it a half a year? Is it a year? But that's the acceleration of it, is that those hours relate towards longer periods of time. So, years of exposure in a salt environment, not just that's the acceleration of it, because you're putting it in a 3 to 5% salt fog. You'll put a cut in that, either an X or a scribe, and it sits at a 45-degree angle, so that you constantly have moisture and heat coming down on that. And what you're looking for then is does that creep back from the scribe? And it's really a function of a whole system, because the powder coating can only do so much.
Right.
The pre-treatment has a big effect on that, as far as how things creep. Because what happens is you get the rivers of water. The salt comes in and starts to break down the lower surface, and then the rivers of water just go through, and you start to get delamination from there.
Yeah.
If the pre-treatment's holding, you don't get those rivers of water going through, and that holds that line really, really tight. Custom coaters see it. So, they've seen some panels like that. The biggest one I always refer to people is like vehicles. Somebody keys an area on your car. Sometimes it never grows. Sometimes it ends up being like this big, it's like coming off everywhere. And that's the difference really in the pre-treatment. Like if it stays in one spot and rusts, it's actually working. It's doing its job.
It's doing its job. Interesting. Yeah.
It's when it starts to grow. If that spot grows and grows and grows and grows really fast, then you have a real problem with the pre-treatment. If it rusts in that one spot, because that's I was in pre-treatment, I was in paint, and I brought panels back to coaters before, like, oh yeah, look how good this is. I'm like, oh my God, that looks terrible, because the scribe line, right, like where we cut it all the way down to the metal, is red and rusted, and there's like a bloom of rust, and then it looks really bad, but the paint is still stuck to that line, and that's what you want, because the paint can't fix right where it's not at.
Right.
And so what you're looking for is a whole test of the system and how well, if you do damage it, it can resist and be localized, and that's kind of what that's really testing.
That's a great way to explain why test panels are so vitally important. And I agree with you. Like, it seems like you're the perfect person for this episode, because your background has led you to where you are today. And there's no way, if you hadn't done all those things, Scott, that you would have been able to explain that to me in such a straightforward manner. Okay? You know what I mean?
Yes, I have to do both a lot of times. So it's been a fun ride, but I talk to chemists, so I had to, as a salesperson, right? Not everybody likes a sales guy, but part of your job is to, the chemist teaches you exactly how these things work and what they did, and then you have to go explain it to other people. And so people understand these things at any different times, right? Today I did have a conversation earlier with a PhD chemist on a new project that we're working on, right? And that's a different conversation than, somebody needs to know, okay, how can I help my business just be better, and break it down for me so I can, in that eggshell moment. I don't know. I always try to relate it to what people may have experienced in the past, so that it hits home better. It resonates.
No, I think you did a great job. And that's why I wanted you on the show, because how do you make test panels exciting? Right.
There's like 2 or 3 of us here. It is really bad. We have people here that came out of industry, And it is terrible that the stuff that we sit around and people would be completely bored about, that we're just fascinated about, like, why did that fail? I mean, like, how did that happen? Because we have a test lab here. It's one of the things we do. We have, we're fully accredited.
I was going to ask you if you did.
Yeah, so we not only do we, so we can test things too. So that's another resource that we can be for ACT, is if somebody wanted to check out what their quality was like, we can put a program together to do that. But we see all kinds of things, and this is people trying to get approved for large OEMs or automakers, that kind of stuff. And with the stuff that we've seen over time, we'll run into things and just be fascinated. Or just like custom coders will get new parts and be like, what is that? Like, what are they doing? I don't. And it's been an interesting time with all the new EV stuff and different things, even in architectural and things. So it's always neat. I am that geek. I'm that paint geek that loves to see like how things were made, walk through different shops and see all these different things. So that's been a fun part of the ride I'm having.
Well, that's awesome because, like you're talking about like rectangles, right? And what do they do? And you're poking them and they're just laying there on the,
Well, I'll tell you, Kim, in the joke in my house, because my career is actually so boring. And I mean, I was honestly, like you asked me at the beginning of the show, like, oh, you've been around the world to see these things. I've been stopped coming back from, I think it was China. And I told them who I worked for and sold paint. And they're like, why were you out of the country? That makes no sense. I mean, literally questioning me why I was out of the country. And so I had to explain, I'm in industry, like not wall paint. It was very different. But it's actually so boring that the joke in my house, my kids tell everybody that I actually work for the CIA, that there's no reason that anybody needed to travel the world for the paint, and I'm an international hitman. So, that's how bad of a geek I am. So the stuff that I talk about is so boring at home that I actually have an alter ego that's what they believe I actually am. So
I wouldn't blame them one bit, right? It's just such a wide variety that you've come from, right? It really makes you who you are, right? You don't think all these years you've dedicated to this industry matter, but here I'm telling you right now, in this very moment, it does, right?
Well,
so now you'll have a visual proof because we'll send the episode to your family. And
right,
say,
and the CIA is going to pull my card back, right?
But I hear what you're saying. It's like we had to send some powder to the UK the other day for one of our custom coders over there. And oh my God, I got the 3rd degree. And I thought, I need to prepare more for these Federal Express people.
Customs
like, what are you sending? This is powder. Because, I brought it. I didn't package it before I got there. I literally grabbed a free box off the shelf because it was just a small little packet. Right. It wasn't even white. It was kind of a black powder or whatever. It's not like I came in there with a bag of, what. And I put it in, and just from the moment me putting it in the box, it was just like, what do you have? And I'm like,
Man. In industry, I worked at a distribution point, and it was around the time like packages were going around, I think with like cyanide powder and that kind of stuff in them.
Right.
So we had a driver one time freak out because there's powder coming out of this thing. It's like, well, because it's powder.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not. It doesn't mean it's bad for you, right? Or like you did it, and you're really lucky because you deal only in powders. When you get to the liquid side of it, that's when they get.
That's
really crazy, and the evolution of that, and for the good reasons. I mean, you got volatility to those, flammability. There's a ton of problems in that.
And the beauty of powder coating. Whole thing with them too. I'm like, it's powdered paint without all the VOCs and the solvents and stuff. Yeah. You can see that as I'm putting it in the box. And then we had to go look through these codes and forever. And I'm like, she couldn't find the code in the system for what we were shipping. I mean,
your commodity code is definitely something that you want.
I need to know what that is. You got to tell me at the end of this show what it is, because I'm going to write it down and use it, because I don't want to get questioned like that. Get the 3rd degree like that again. And So then after hemming and hawing, and she thinks she's pressed, the right codes in there, but won't tell me what the codes are.
Oh.
She wouldn't share her screen with me. I'm like, well, I don't want this to happen again. Can you give me the code?
Yeah.
And she wouldn't share it with me. All I kept saying was, it's general merchandise. It's just samples. There's no value to it at all. There wasn't an invoice attached to this at all.
Yeah.
And so then after all of that, third degree, and she still didn't believe me about what it was that I was shipping, she goes and says, okay, well, where are you shipping it to? And of course I gave it, I gave like the address to some paint company. And she's like, oh, yeah. I'm like, girl, all you had to do was ask me where it was going to get shipped. You know what I mean? First, you didn't have to drill me on what it was I was shipping first. You just needed to know, where was I shipping it to? And here's the official address online and, in my hand. Right. So it was just, I go, yeah, you kind of gave me the third degree. And I think she felt bad after that. She was much nicer, but like, it's not easy shipping samples of powder. And how do you, even like on a panel, even, it can be.
On a panel, it's not bad because, realistically, it's the same as furniture. It's once it's cured, you should not have any regulations about it. Trust me, we get a lot of issues, particularly out of, Asia and South America.
Yeah.
More about the metal though, right? Because they look at it and I don't know how they think we're dumping metal into their country, but because it's not that many boxes. It's, it's 1,000 panels maybe. But yeah, a lot of codes and that kind of stuff around that. But the volatility, once you cure it, it's basically zero. So with anything we do, we don't produce an SDS or anything like that because it's just not in that state.
It's not necessary. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's get into tracking and recording. Like why do we want to, how I'm kind of curious because we make a lot of samples here for our patina effects, right? We're testing out new samples. We're creating new effects every day here. And so it's starting, like, you can't see this right now, but I am staring at about 100 sample panels that we actually ordered from you. And so I've got to label all of these. And I've got to write down what we did and the dates and all that. And I don't even know where to begin because, to be honest with you, we've done sample panels now. We first started, as silly as this sounds, but we literally would just go over to the metal shop around the corner here and have them cut a sheet and stuff of just a 12 by 12 square. And right now, most of the testing that we're doing is not here on Maui. Of course, we don't have the facilities here. It's being done somewhere else on the official stuff. But for samples, designers and everybody's always asking me for these samples. So I've got to send them out. But I need to track like how, our processes, right? Because we've got certain colors and certain effects and all of that. So that's my problem. And so my curiosity kind of leads me to, how do you track? How do you record? How do most people write up when they're doing these testings?
Sure. So, I mean, a lot of things going back to it. I mean, I think the big thing with any things that we can do or anything that saves money and does that is really working with quality control. Mm-hmm. And I think you talk about tracking in particular. So it's, it depends on the size of the shop. If it's one or two people, if it's, 10, 15 people that can touch these things, when something goes wrong, the first thing they say is nothing changed. and trust me, we have that all the time, right? We're looking and doing these things through multiple quality processes, and everything has to be checked off at every different area. So there's no changing there. So if you're looking at, where you are in the process, or if you're, how do we do those things? I mean, we're running, particularly in, well, first off, I would say we are fortunate enough to be a large enough business where we do operate off an ERP.
And what's an ERP?
It's basically it's an operating system that allows us to have kind of part numbers and tracking. throughout the process, right? So it's generating different work orders for different cells. And so I think those things,
I think we talked about that on another episode where we were talking about ISO and certifications and stuff, right?
And there are some companies out there. I mean, I don't work with them, but I know specifically look at the job shop businesses and have more ERP type of capabilities that allows you to build different batch types. We looked at them because we do so much batch work. So we're somewhere in between. Does a straightforward ERP work, or does this batch type of ERP work for us? And really, we have enough consistency that ERP works. But what that does for us is that really does help us in our lot tracking. So, I mean, every time, let's say an operator goes and gets a new coil of steel, they're logging that in. It was tagged when it came in, so we know what batch that's from when we even just start our process. Then we're able to track that through our different systems as it transfers from one cell to another. And what we're then doing is through work order, we're able to track back to days. So a lot of the stuff that we do is based on the day. So when did that come in, and when does that get through a different system? So if you ask me, when was this I got this panel, when was it made? There's a code on the box that comes to you that tells us exactly the last step that went through, and the date, and basically the date it was made. It's got some other information for us. That gives us a record where we can go step back and say, okay, if it was made on that day, it went through this process, and here are the process records from that day. And if I need to know more than that, then here's even when it was cut, and here's the coil that it was cut from. So the ERP helps us quite a bit to be able to do that and track that. But it's also a good way to think about your different processes. So if something does matter, if something is big, where they may come back to you and talk about quality or those types of things, having the records of the different things that you did, and even having maybe a representation, it can be very important. So, obviously we're making panels every day, but we keep a retain panel of our pre-treated, we keep 4 to 5, depending on how long we run in our pre-treatment system during the day. In a 10-hour day, we're going to have 4 to 6 different just retains of what we did. If something gets E-coded, we're going to have retains of each job per metal. So when we look at our quality system, we break it down to when do we make a change. So if we change metals or we change processes, we capture what we were doing in that process, and we relate it to its cell and that day. And so that's what helps us keep control of our batches. And then inside of that, we have the records from each and individual cell. So if I was doing a pre-treatment operation, I would keep something that just represented the pre-treatment at that time. And maybe it's, again, not every day, but if you were doing something critical, an architectural job where they may want to know what happened, how do you, so unless we go get the final part and scrape it down, who knows? But if I could show something of, no, here's the same, I put this treatment on this aluminum, just the same way I treated your aluminum. I painted this aluminum, I painted your aluminum, here's outputs.
Right.
So that doesn't necessarily lead to the full tracking, but it gives you the keys that you'd have to go back to.
Right, because when some huge thing is installed, it's not like you can just uninstall it and bring it back in for testing or whatever. I mean, correct. The panels really make sense at that point for tracking those processes and doing the audits and stuff like that, right. Yeah.
And I would tell you, inside of our cells, when we hold those, we do it by date. So we have panels, we put those in sleeves, and we have shelving, and the shelving has all the months on it. And so in basically three racks by 12 high, we can hold 3 years worth of data in one area, right? So here's 1 year, here's 3 years back, 2 years back, this year. And we do it by when we do the job. So if you know when that purchase order was cut to you and when your job was finished, that's what shelf it would be on. And inside of our departments, it's almost that simple. Now the codes and the ERP helps us lead back to that, but that's a simple way for us to keep, different panels from different processes.
You primarily work in a controlled environment, right? Do you really have to worry about weather, or do you record the weather on those panels too as well in the ERP? Or
no, we don't typically record the weather.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say
if you're a custom coder, you might.
You may want to look at that. It depends on. Now we record. Now going back, because we were talking earlier about storage, we store our powders as well as we store our metals in humidity controlled rooms.
Okay.
And we have graphing data by hour, every day, all day, of those humidity controlled areas. So for that, we do have humidity control. Inside of our paint rooms, we have cooling air. We have a little bit of heating air. We don't do moisture. Not so much difficult for powder. I would say it's something we're looking at installing for doing waterborne coatings. It would really help us there.
Right.
But we do have a clean, pressurized environment that has hot and cold air.
Yeah. As expected, because you're the testers, right? So, but I mean, for the average powder coating company, I would say, time of year, seasons, weather conditions definitely are huge and play a huge effect on that.
And a big factor, the incoming, right? Because did they drop off the metal and put it on your back dock when it was raining? I mean, I've seen it, right? Or
yeah. I mean, the whole point of this is to prevent human error, because it just seems like humans are getting in the way of everything. We just need robots.
Maybe, yeah. Could help some days.
Definitely, right? I'm just doing my job, dropping this off. I don't need, who cares what it's for? I don't know, right?
Yeah. So did you leave that in the rain? Yeah. Is that a problem? Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, I mean, trust me, we've had people pull up with metal and it's raining, and then it's like we're taking off these huge coils. It's like, hey, it's going to take 5 minutes to come back. Can you cover that again? We don't need more problems. I don't need spot rust because it's a bad day. So it is the little things that you have to think about in these operations. Certainly the average consumer of those things don't think about it.
Right. Well, I'm thinking back to the end of last week. It was a Friday. Ross had gone home early because he was done for the week. So I'm just here alone. And this guy pulls up in a flatbed with this gigantic, fully rusted square. It's not a box. It's just a square frame or a rectangular frame.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what the hell is this? I mean, the welder probably took steel that had been sitting out in his yard on Maui in the sun and the rain. That had to be at least 5. It looked like it was 5 years old. Some parts were more rust. Some parts of it were, it's all fully already finished. So, I mean, it's not impossible to, obviously blasting is going to be needed, right? We already discussed that in the bid part.
Yeah.
But, this thing.
I didn't know it was going to be this bad.
I didn't know it was going to be this bad.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it was going to be this big.
Oh. Okay.
And I'm like looking at he brought the bid in saying the day before saying, okay, this is coming. We'll see you tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm looking back at the papers that he dropped off because we didn't, he just came in and said, hi, this is coming your way. And we're like, okay. So he left that paperwork there. Then I go to our original paperwork. And this guy's fully old school too, on top of that, and I'm looking at our papers and I'm looking at his papers and I'm like, well, it's the same kind of drawings from the same architect, but the dimensions are way off, compared to what we bid it on. And I'm thinking, how did we make this mistake? So I'm like going back and forth. And I'm like, something's not right here. I mean, we expected the steel, and I can handle that. It's a little rusty, mill scale, whatever. It's a beyond mill scale at this point, but like, it's not new. And then I'm realizing the thing has grown either on its own.
Multiplying metal. Everybody wants some of that.
And it's like, it's gone from 3 feet 6 inches to 4 feet. And at this point, because of the way we've built our oven, the elements are going to stick out, kind of stick out from inside. Mm-hmm. And there's no way. I mean, on top of the fact that this thing is so friggin' heavy, we need to build a separate rack just for this thing, because the minute we can't even hang this thing, it's so heavy.
So this is that I was talking about that earlier, right? People show up with things like they engineer something, but they don't think about painting, or they don't think about the limitations of the painter. Like, an extra foot's a problem. Well, there's an oven involved. Right? Or because if I do have a washer, but it won't make the turn, like, this is a problem. So it's amazing the things that people don't think of as a problem when you get to finishing become a whole different.
It's a whole other nightmare. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the guy wanted it. We couldn't even get it off. It was so huge. They needed extensions on their what is it? The forklift. They needed an extension. They almost needed one of those high lifts, the bigger ones that do like strap stuff and everything.
Like almost like a crane.
Crane type one. And ours is so tiny.
Right. And there's a reason for that. Like, this is the side part we do.
Exactly. This thing works just for us, right? Yeah. And I mean, it can't fit into the blast room, which means we have to go somewhere else to get the blasting, which means now that's out of our control.
Right.
I mean, it was just, I don't know. I haven't heard back from the guy yet, but we'll see what happens with this. And, I don't know where this is, but it doesn't matter where it's going. It's for a restaurant of some sort, or maybe a resort. It doesn't matter. We live in a giant salt bath. Why would you make something out of steel that you want it to be long lasting in a resort or a restaurant? I can't even understand what this part is supposed to do,
right? And
how they're even going to install it, because it's that massive, that big.
Well, hopefully it's going indoors.
No, I don't think so. I think it's some kind of storage system for lanai furniture or patio furniture, when they stack them all, or I can't even understand what it is for. But I can understand, I know now who's doing the job, who the contractor is, and I know who the welder is. So now I go, oh yeah, that makes sense why it's all messed up like that. But you said something about managing the message and color space in your past experience.
Oh yeah. So one of the things I did do at Sherwin-Williams at one time is, how, again, reps will come out and they'll give you chips, or, is it an RAL palette? Is it a custom color palette? What's the architectural palette look like? I actually I did that for a couple of years. So I was the marketing person that helped pull those programs together, perpetuate those programs, bring new things forward to try to attract or offer better products into the market. And, you've had different people in that industry doing different things, whether it's the size of boxes that you can get, or, can you get a couple pounds, or are you going to be a producer that's only doing large batches? I mean, the market has changed dramatically from the time that I entered in powder coating to where it is today, with the number of custom coaters that are out there, the number of people who produce powder. While the barrier to entry is not low, it's not as high as doing liquids because of the environmental piece of that, plus just the cost of the equipment and doing that. So the competition and the different ideas that have been put together to service really different segments of powder coating have been interesting. So that was one of the things that I did is talk about the messaging, I was at one of the early phases. I don't know if you've seen the two-coat powder processes that some companies have, where you can put on a primer and a top coat, dry on dry, and then bake them together.
Right. Two at a time. Yeah.
Those are neat products. I think several companies have those. You talked about the architectural market, or even like architectural steel. That's a great idea for those. Using particularly on steel like that, using a zinc rich, and then a super durable over the top of that.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody's going to use
our
steel,
go-to here.
That type of system back to back would be, very cost effective and big for those, and saves a bake. So for a small custom coder, that's kind of that messaging piece as those are coming out, right? Why do that? I could just do it twice. Well, if you're going to heat up a massive piece of metal and then let it come back down and then pound it again and then let it do that, that's costing you money. The person's standing around waiting for the oven. Maybe they're sweeping. Maybe you don't put a cost to that. But the reality is, if I could coat it twice and get it in the oven once, there is a cost savings to that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, right now, as it stands with our unique estimating, we charge 65% for the primer base, because we do bake it twice. I didn't feel like it was necessary to do a whole 100% for each coat, primer and color coat. But I felt like 65%, and we include the powder in that price, because primers are generally a lot cheaper than, although they are creeping up in price. But
the messaging I always gave too was, don't change your price, just change your cost structure. Right. So charge them like you're doing two coats, but you're basically only doing a changeover. If you have two powder guns, this is really smooth.
Yeah.
Save the money, upcharge them for that double coat process, and find a way to save your cost in that output.
Yeah. I'll have to talk to Ross about that. That's really interesting. I've never heard anybody talk about that on the show before. So
it's used in certain industries. I mean, they call it dust on dust, dry on dry. That was just a unique one that came through. It is used by some of the large OEM agricultural companies just to get, upgrade. But we talked about it a lot, or I talked about it a lot when I was in that role, helping people, because I think it's a great one, particularly for any steel architectural or anything where people are looking for an upgrade. You don't add an extra bake to it. You add an extra charge to it. Somebody's getting more out of you, and I think you can upsell and really not change your timing, which is a big cost saver for a custom coder.
I got a great idea. I think I need some test panels for that.
And they were out there, and the product was designed on test panels just like that. So,
What a great way to wrap up this show. I love it, Scott. We couldn't have ended that way better. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today. And before we hop off, I wanted to just throw up your website one more time, acttestpanels.com.
Yes.
Head on over there, get your panels, order online, which is always awesome. Get an account with them, or just give them a call. Sometimes when you're ordering test panels, you're not sure exactly what size or what thickness or what type you need. I know I needed some help when I just made a recent purchase from you guys, because we wanted to try your panels out. And so far, so good. I like it.
Great. Yep. Any of those work for us? We're here in Central Michigan, so we do operate on Eastern time. But we're in fairly early and here till about 5 o'clock.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thanks for joining me again, Scott Crossley from ACT. Be sure to share this episode, subscribe to the podcast at Rosscote, ROSSKOTE. We got a new Instagram with the same letters, words, whatever, Rosscote. So please head on over there and give us a like and follow. Have a great day, everyone. Aloha.